The 2023 college football season has been over for about 3 weeks now, and I have spent that time analyzing and calculating every game this past season and figuring out the best ones. Not really, but I have went back, rewatched a lot of them, and narrowed my top 20 games down of this past college football season, even with some honorable mentions. So here they go. My first honorable mention, Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State won the final matchup of Bedlam for the foreseeable future 27-24. This had one of the wildest atmospheres in all of college football last year, and the Cowboys got to send the Sooners to the SEC with a loss. Second honorable mention, LSU versus Missouri. LSU somehow won this one 49-39 in one of the craziest games of the year. Missouri was up by 15 at one point, and Jaden Daniels just put on the superhero cape and drugged this team to a win. Next, and a controversial one, Alabama versus Texas. It didn't make my top 20 just because it was not a last-minute game or a last-second game, but it was still really, really good. All the way back in Week 2, Texas went into Tuscaloosa at night and won 34-24, probably the most impressive win of the season. Jalen Milroe showed some flaws that he eventually corrected later in the season, but Texas took advantage with a couple of picks. The Xavier Worthy and Ewers connection was also at an all-time high. Also, a game that happened the exact same time Alabama and Texas was going on, Oregon squeaked out a win in Lubbock over Texas Tech. Texas Tech led the whole way. Tyler Shaw ran all over the place, but when it came down to it, Bo Nix led them to a 1-point lead with just a minute left, and Shaw made his biggest mistake of the night, throwing a pick six to pretty much seal it. Last honorable mention, USC beats Arizona 43-41 in triple overtime. A game that has a very different memory to it as Arizona went on to be the better team, and we were all confused as to why USC struggled when we really should have been thinking what a great win for USC. This game was back and forth and came down to a 2-point conversion to win it, and this turned out to be Arizona's last loss of the season. Alright, coming into my top 20, LSU beats Arkansas in Baton Rouge 34-31. I think this was week 4. A game that started off slow in the first half that exploded in the second half with both offenses looking unstoppable. The battle between Jaden Daniels and KJ Jefferson was phenomenal, and Brian Thomas proved to be one of the best receivers in this country. LSU eventually kicked the game-winning field goal, and this loss just added to heartbreak for Razorback fans. I'm the Razorback fan that was heartbroken that night. At number 19, Utah gave USC its second straight loss. They beat them on a last-second field goal 34-32. This was a game where Lincoln Riley relied on his defense in the last moments, and that's not something you hear from USC at all. And it really looked like it was going to work until it didn't. Bryson Barnes broke off a long scramble in the final seconds. I want to say it was on third down as well. He set his kicker up really nice, and Utah walked it off in Los Angeles. Up next, we have one of the playoff games. Washington beats Texas 37-31. This was a game where Washington controlled it until the final seconds. The Huskies held a 37-28 lead in the final minutes before Texas cut it to 6. Washington got the onside kick, and then disaster struck pretty much. Their star running back Dylan Johnson, transferred from Mississippi State, looked to have a rough injury, a leg injury, and to add to that, they had to take an injury timeout, which preserved 40 more seconds for the Longhorns to work with if they got a stop on third down. They eventually got that stop and got the ball with 45 seconds left, needing a touchdown. They drove it all the way to the 12-yard line, and Ewers ended up having 4 passes to get it in, and they just couldn't do it. At 17, Missouri squeaks by Florida 33-31 on another last-second field goal. This game was the second to last week of the season, one of the best games Florida played all year, and this win would have gave them bowl eligibility, and it would have been one of the best wins of the Napier era. Instead, Brady Cook converted a 4th and 17 in the final seconds, and the thicker kicker, Harrison Mevis, walked it off for the Tigers. Coming in at 16, the Kansas Jayhawks get one of their program's biggest wins, beating Oklahoma, who was number 6 at the time, 38-33. This gave Oklahoma their first loss of the season, and they still had playoff hopes at the time, so it keeps getting better and better for the Jayhawks. Jason Bean, the backup quarterback for Kansas, he did make some bean-headed plays in this one, but he made up for it in the final drive and gave his team a 5-point lead with about a minute left. Dylan Gabriel was not done, though. They got into the red zone quick and had several opportunities to win it, but the Jayhawks prevailed, one of the best moments of the season. Next, we have the first and only non-playoff bowl game on this list. Clemson beats Kentucky in the Gator Bowl. This was a game that the fourth quarter started with a 21-10 Wildcat lead and ended with a 38-35 win for Clemson. There were 36 points scored in the final 7 minutes, including Phil Maffa's game-winning touchdown run with about 17 seconds left. Maffa also had 4 touchdowns on the day, which is a Gator Bowl record. At number 14, going all the way back to week 1, Colorado Colorado beats TCU 45-42. They shocked the world, and more importantly, they shocked the TCU Horned Frogs. TCU was picked by 20.5, and the Buffs did not care one bit. Shedeur played like a Heisman candidate, while Travis Hunter looked like the best player on both sides of the ball. Such a back and forth game, so many lead changes. It got everyone in the right mood for college football season. At 13, I'm going Notre Dame versus Duke. Notre Dame somehow pulled it out with a 7-point win in a tough road environment. Duke had a chance to get one of the biggest wins of their program, but they fell just short. They were down 13-0 for a while. Riley Leonard gave them a 14-13 lead, and then the Blue Devils forced a 4th and 16 with under a minute left. But Sam Hartman converted. Audric Estime eventually ran it in for the go-ahead score and killed all the dreams of the Duke fans. Coming in at number 12, Alabama snaps Georgia's 29 or 30 game win streak. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they snapped it in the SEC Championship 27-24. A lot of history in this one since Alabama went on to be in the playoff. Saban retired, and Georgia felt like they still should be in the playoff. But nevertheless, Alabama pulled it off, winning by 3 practically in Georgia's backyard in Atlanta. Georgia came out, opening touchdown drive 7-0, but Alabama controlled it pretty much the rest of the way. Some mistakes by Carson Beck in the second half with that fumble, really big one, and some opportunistic plays by Milroe with his feet late, and that ball game won it for him. At number 11, Michigan wins its 3rd straight against Ohio State 30-24. We all know this was the game circled on both of these teams' calendars all season. It is the game. A playoff berth is on the line. I mean, the stakes could not be any higher. 11 a.m. Fox kickoff, all the drama with Harbaugh, it was beautiful. Michigan capitalized off of some Kyle McCord mistakes, some early ones, but Ohio State eventually turned it around and looked like they were going to control the ball on the ground, especially. The defensive line was looking pretty good. The turning point was when Zach Zinter, Michigan's offensive lineman, was carted off with a leg injury late in the 3rd quarter. Something in that place just changed, man. It got emotional. The next play was a Blake Corum touchdown, and they never looked back. Michigan's secondary picked off McCord on the Buckeyes' final chance, and that was it. Coming in at number 10, Florida State goes into Clemson and wins 31-24 in double overtime. If Clemson could have had some plays flip their way, man, their whole season could have changed for the positive, but instead they found themselves with 2 losses in the month of September. Clemson led the whole way, even had a chance to go up by 2 possessions in the 3rd quarter, but the Seminoles got a 60-yard scoop and score to tie it at 24. Obviously the biggest play of the game, and the play I'll remember most from this ball game. The whole place was stunned. FSU went on to win in overtime in one of the best games of the year. At 9, we have a weird one. Would not expect to have this one on my list, but the drama with the coaches and the in-state rivalry, as well as the night game, it just added to all the electricity between Colorado and Colorado State. A Week 3 game that kicked off at 9 p.m. with the Bucks picked by over 3 touchdowns should not be making this list, but it was awesome. Colorado was down 11 in the final 6 minutes and made some big plays to tie it up in the final moments. They eventually won 43-35, and it would be one of their last wins of the season. Coming in at number 8, Ohio State goes into South Bend and steals a 17-14 win over Notre Dame. If you want to talk about atmospheres, this is one of the best atmospheres you will ever see. A night game in South Bend, green Notre Dame jerseys, a top 10 matchup, touchdown Jesus, Ryan Day versus Mark and Frank, Ryan Day versus Lou Holtz, Frank the Tank and Shane Gillis were there. Sam Hartman with a chance to get his best win ever, and it all comes up just short. Ohio State jumps to a 10-0 lead in the 3rd, but Notre Dame started getting their running game going and took a 14-10 lead with about 8 minutes left. Had a couple of possessions to run the clock out, but the Ohio State defense kept getting stops. Kyle McCord got his final opportunity with a little over a minute left and drove his team to the 1 with only 1 second left. With only 1 second left, they run the ball. They give it to Chip Tranum, and the Bucks win on the final play. It was such an exhilarating game and devastating for the stadium there. At number 7, we have the biggest basketball rivalry of all time turned into a huge football game in the month of November. North Carolina squeaks it out over Duke 47-45 in 2 overtimes. This game heated up in the 4th, man, with the Tar Heels. They held a 12-point lead early in the 4th before Duke and Jordan Waters took a 29-26 lead with 5 minutes left. Drake May led another touchdown drive to take the lead back with about 2 minutes left, but his night was not even close to being over. 1 minute later, Duke had the lead back. North Carolina was down 3 with about 40 seconds left. The crowd was stunned, but Drake May did it again, man. Got him in field goal range, went to overtime, and in overtime, Duke just could not convert a 2-point conversion. A wild win for the Tar Heels. Coming in at 6, we have another field storming. Missouri beats Kansas State 30-27, and another Harrison Mevis walk-off field goal. All the way back to Week 3, Missouri gets a chance to knock off the 15th ranked Wildcats and let the football world know they are serious. And they did it. Luther Burden was all over the place. This game was back and forth, and the thicker kicker hit another walk-off. Even after his offense got a penalty and made it 5 yards further for him, it did not matter. At 5, we have Washington versus Oregon, Part 1. I chose not to include both of these games for some reason, so I went with the regular season matchup over the conference championship matchup. These two teams went at it, both with playoff hopes on the line and statements to make. Oregon went to Seattle, played great, had several chances to win, but some questionable decisions by Dan Lanning will always be remembered in this game. Michael Penix and the Huskies just kept responding, eventually going up 3 late in the game. Bo Nix drove down the field, got his kicker in prime position, and he missed it pretty bad. It was rough watching on TV. It was a huge win for Washington, and it was a step for this team to go further than just a conference championship. Rounding in the top 4, we go to Ole Miss versus LSU, where Lane Kiffin gets his biggest win of his career, in my opinion, in Oxford. Ole Miss won at 55-49. This game had fireworks everywhere. Daniels proved his Heisman case in a loss. Malik Neighbors went crazy. Jackson Dart played awesome. Trey Harris and Dayton Wade were great, as well as Quinshon Judkins. The Rebels started as hot as you can. 14-0, 21-7. I think it was 28-14 at one point as well. All to end up being down 49-40 with about 7 minutes left. Then they decided to feed Judkins and Bentley, and that's all they had to do. I have never seen so many run plays on a 2-minute drive ever. They scored with 39 seconds to go up by 6, and it was still too much time for that LSU offense. The Tigers drove down to the red zone, had plenty of chances, but it did not work out. The Rebel fans stormed the field, and it was beautiful. At 3 is one of the last games of the year. Michigan beats Alabama 27-20 in the Rose Bowl. The setting for the Rose Bowl, as always, was amazing. So much drama with this one, especially on the Michigan side. The sign-stealing scandal, the video of the athletes seeing Alabama as their matchup, Harbaugh being back, the question of can they get a playoff win, and they shut it all up. They were the more physical team. They owned the line of scrimmage. They sacked Jalen Milroe several times. J.J. McCarthy was even great. After getting some nervousness out of his system, Blake Corum was awesome. Milroe had a huge fumble, kind of turned the game on its head. It looked like Alabama could have had a promising drive when they were already up by 4. And then, of course, the last play of Nick Saban's career. It will always be talked about. It was such a huge matchup of heavyweights in this one. Coming in at runner-up, Oklahoma takes down Texas in the Red River Shootout. This game was all over the place. The first 6 minutes had an interception, the second play of the game, a touchdown, a punt block, and then another touchdown. Oklahoma started to get a little comfortable. They held a 10-point lead for over 10 minutes in the second half before Texas cut it to 7. With about 7 minutes left, Oklahoma missed a field goal that would have made it 10 points, would have made it 30-20. Texas would then go on to take the lead 30-27 with about a minute and 17 left. Then Dylan Gabriel started popping off, drove him to the 6-yard line in 4 plays, and hit Nick Anderson for the game-winning touchdown. Awesome ending to one of the best rivalries in the sport. But speaking of rivalries, coming in at number 1, Alabama beats Auburn 27-24 on a 4th and 31 play that will always be remembered. The best rivalries to me mean that no matter how good or bad each team is, the game will always be tough for both sides. And that's exactly how this one's set up. Auburn at 6-5. Coming off a home blowout loss to New Mexico State, they host number 8 Alabama with playoff hopes in their grasp, 9 straight wins, and the game was still neck and neck. Jordan Hare was electric, one of the toughest places to play no matter what. Down 24-25 minutes left, Alabama had to punt it back to the Tigers. The Auburn returner muffed the punt, and Alabama recovered it only 30 yards away from the end zone. But then Auburn forced a 3rd and 20, and Jalen Milroe picked up 19 on a scramble and made it 4th and 1 at the 10-yard line. Roydale Williams got the first down, and then chaos ensued. The snap went over Milroe's head, a constant for Alabama fans this whole season, and it caused him to recover it at the 26-yard line. Then an illegal forward pass made it 4th and goal at the 31. The stadium was ready to pop. It had set into Alabama fans that the dream season had ended, but it didn't. Isaiah Bond somehow got a one-on-one matchup in the left corner of the end zone, and Milroe found him to win the game. The place was silent. Hugh Freeze was pretty much in tears. It was ugly in Auburn, but in my opinion, it was the best game of the year. Well, that's all I got, guys. Like and subscribe for more rankings. I appreciate y'all.